Might have been a better idea to do the hardware beforehand. CSSON. Alright. Just gonna wait for a couple people to join. I don't think very many people, if anybody, is on. So I'll just let that get started. 1 second, let me reload it. Maybe something's changed. I don't know how long. Alright, I guess if anybody is on, can you just or watching or something? It's not showing anything on here. Can you just put it in chat? Just want to make sure there's, somebody here. Okay. Alright, I see Izzy. Alright, I guess I imagine Scott would join soon. He seemed like he was gonna hop on. So alright. Okay. I guess I just start, and then it seems like Scott might join too. I don't know. It's only gonna be 2 people probably. I don't know. Alright, so I guess alright, so I'm going to probably cut it here. Alright. Alright. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and neither in between, and neither either or in between. I have to get that down. Neither either in between. To the weekly Linux newscast. I know it hasn't been weekly recently, or at all, ever, but that's work in progress. So just a couple things off the top. In terms of the channel, I've been streaming more, so that's just a fact. It'll increase. It'll keep increasing, hopefully, over the weekends. Then things like this, again, I should start having more time now that I'm adjusted to school. I don't know, it all sort of depends on what exactly is happening. So, I'll just keep that in mind. Alright. So, we have a lot to get to, so I'll just get started right now. So, the kernel report. The compute accelerator subsystem it's hoped to be ready for the Linux kernel 6.2. Thanks to this year's Linux Plumbers Conference, I'll reference it as the LPC from now onward. It looks like the compute accelerator subsystem / framework is finally coming together. The fourth and potentially final iteration of the accelerator framework patches have been sent out with hopes of them being mainlined for the upcoming 6.2 kernel. At this year's LPC event, there was finally a consensus reached about how among upstream developers how to handle an accelerator subsystem moving forward, following a long debate of new subsystem versus DRM subsystem versus the existing char miscellaneous status quo. This new subsystem will be leveraging the Direct Rendering Manager (DRM) infrastructure, given there being much in common between various AI accelerators and GPUs. Alright, Linux 6.1-RC6 has been released. It is still coming in a bit larger than Torvalds would like. Last week, Linux 6.1 RC5, with that release, Linux 6.1 RC5, there was concerns raised by Torvalds that the v6.1 cycle may need an extra week of testing and fixes. Now 6.1 RC6 is available with Torvalds' latest prognosis for the Linux kernel 6.1 cycle. Torvalds wrote as today's Linux 6.1 RC announcement. I'm just going to read it off. If you're watching the video recording of this, it's going to be in the upper, right about here. I'm not great with directions, but it should be right about here. So here we are at the RC6, and the story hasn't changed. This release RC. I should probably stop and just clarify. RC is release candidate for those who are unfamiliar with the terminology in the Linux versioning. Last week with Linux 6.1 RC, with Linux 6.1 RC5, there were concerns raised by Torvalds that I just said that. I'll just keep going. That the 6.1 cycle may need an extra week of testing and fixes. Now he said that in the release announcement. So here we are at RC6, and the story hasn't changed. This RC is a bit larger than I would have preferred, but at the same time there's nothing that looks scary or particularly odd here. It's predominantly driver changes all over, with networking and GPU drivers, not surprisingly, leading the pack, but it's really a fairly mixed bag. Outside of drivers, you have the usual smattering of core kernel code, architecture updates, some file system work, and some core kernel and networking. It's easy enough to scan through the appended short log and get a feeling for what's going on. Absolutely nothing makes me worried, apart from the fact that there's still a fair number of them. I'm still waffling about whether there will be an RC8 or not, leaning a bit towards it happening. We'll see. It will just make the 6.2 merge window leak into the holidays, but maybe that's fine and just makes people make sure they have everything lined up and ready, hopefully before the merge window opens, just the way that things should work. So we'll see. Nothing worrisome, just 300 plus small fixes in last week. Please go test. Linus Torvalds. Linux 6.1 stable will tentatively release on the 4th of December of this year if Linus Torvalds doesn't opt for the 6.1 RC8 release. Otherwise, it will push the final release back to the 11th of December. Okay. Firmware news. We do not have much in the way of firmware news. There was more for the kernel than there was news. So firmware, there is a new Desharo version 1.1 firmware for the MSI Z690 board. One of the exciting open source milestones this year was the Desharo core boot being ported to a modern Intel Alder Lake Z690 motherboard that is readily available at a decent price. That work by open source firmware engineers at 3M Deb was focused on the MSI Pro Z690A Wi-Fi DDR4 motherboard. While today's V1.1 release, there was also support now for MSI Pro Z690A Wi-Fi DDR5. With today's Desharo version 1.1 firmware update for the MSI Pro Z60A Wi-Fi DDR4, most notable is the DDR5 of this version is being supported. All right, now on to some OS news. I have 4 highlights I just want to go over. Most of them are minor. And then I'm just going 5 highlights, and then just a list of the distro releases that came out this cycle. So, Tails OS, the Debian-based anonymity-focused operating system, has released version 5.7. It's been synced with the upstream software repositories of the Debian GNU/Linux 11 Bullseye operating system series, and is still powered by by the 5.10 LTS kernel series, but since it's based off of Debian, that is to be expected. Debian 5.7 is here to introduce a new tool that promises to let you clean metadata from your files. This tool is called Metadata Cleaner and comes as a drop-in replacement for MAT. MAT, it's all caps. I'm not entirely sure. Which it uses as a backend, supporting the same file formats and offering the same level of security. Just a couple other things, a couple other notes about what exactly Tails OS is, and how it makes it, and how it is so anonymity focused. Ugh. So I guess to offer the highest level of anonymity, can't speak today. Tails 5.7 comes with the very latest Tor anonymous software, including the Tor browser 11.5.8 and Tor 0.4.7.11, as well as improvements to the Tor connection assistant, which also better explains how to use the unsafe browser to sign in. Use the unsafe browser to sign in to a local network, and no longer displays the easier and safer comments in the first screen. Then there were a couple minor changes. There were some bug fixes and minor changes, things that are usually expected. Serpent OS. This is a new Linux distribution that has not been dropped yet. It's being developed by Ike Doherty, who went to work full-time on Serpent OS. For those who don't know who that is, he was he created the Solus Linux distribution and worked for Intel on the Clear Linux distribution, and has other software accomplishments to his name. It's been quite a few months for Serpent OS, but it turns out they've been busy establishing the build infrastructure and tooling. The idea behind Serpent OS is to be a modern Linux distribution that is highly optimized for today's hardware and to effectively take a look at the operating system stack. But since Ike's June announcement of returning to work full-time on Serpent OS, there haven't been any major news, while it turns out they've been busy on getting ready for their own build infrastructure and tooling from scratch. So based off of that, it appears as though it is not based off of anything. It is entirely independently developed. Serpent's infrastructure is nearing the testing phase, approaching the point that developers can submit and build new packages for the Serpent OS repository, and then focus on the bring up of Serpent OS. I put that in quotes as it is as it was quoted in Phoronix, which is where I pulled this article. For any interested, I'm gonna obviously all of these are gonna be linked in the comment description, the description down below. But there is a blog post also linked on that in case you want to view the actual content of the announcement. Alright, the Asahi Linux project makes progress on USB 3 towards speaker support, keyboard backlight. The Asahi Linux distribution is very unique. Well, I don't know if it's unique. It's another Linux distribution basically, but it is unique in the sense that it is very focused on Apple hardware. Apple hardware is a little bit different than normal hardware. It is, it's Apple. I don't really think I need to explain too much more than that, but it's boxed in like everything else, and so it's being developed separately. But recently it's been gaining more traction, but as going into the article says, the Asahi Linux crew has published their November 2022 status report, highlighting recent open source progress on supporting the Apple Silicon M1, M2 devices under Linux. Good progress continues to be made on fully supporting Apple's modern ARM-based SoC and systems under Linux, thanks to reverse engineering, the open source, thanks to the thanks to the reverse engineering open source community. Some of the latest Asahi Linux milestones in this long effort include USB 3 mode for the Thunderbolt ports should be pretty solid. Prior to this, Asahi was operating the Thunderbolt ports just as USB 2. Some glitches in USB 3 support are to be expected, just as a forewarning. The integrated MacBook, MacBook Pro, MacBook Air speakers remain disabled by default still, but the progress is being made on as to be able to safely enable it. Headphone jack support is now working across the spectrum of devices after reverse engineering the CS42L84 headphone codec. Keyboard backlight support is now working. Just some other minor things, continued work around power management and continued improvements to the Asahi installer. And then Ubuntu, this is very small, it's literally one sentence. Ubuntu 23.04, which is Lunar Lobster, has its release date slated for April 20th, 2023. This will not be an LTS release. Microsoft promotes Windows subsystem for Linux, WSL, to GA status. Now, while not everybody might consider Windows subsystem for Linux the same as Linux, it has still brought Linux to a wider community, so that's why this is included. While the Windows subsystem for Linux, WSL, has been around for about 6 years now, and the WSL2 is on to running graphical Linux apps with GPU acceleration and wide array of capabilities, including the ability to run systemd and the like, only today has Microsoft promoted WSL to the general availability, GA, status on Windows 10 and 11. Microsoft recently declared Windows subsystem for Linux as version 1.0, and today they are reflecting that by dropping the long-used preview label within the Microsoft Store. WSL within the Microsoft Store is now deemed general availability with the latest software updates on Windows 10 and 11. The latest WSL updates have fixed, in the words of Microsoft, hundreds of bugs, as well as the opt-in systemd opt-in systemd support, various command improvements, and a variety of others. Alright, distro releases. There's only about 4 that have been released in the past week or so. I think maybe it's been a little bit more than a week on some of these, but, just give me some room. Alma Linux 9.1, Fedora Linux 3.7, RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.7, and Alpine Linux 3.17. Extras, just some other things about hardware, specifically AMD. I'm not sure if you've seen anything about AMD. This has been a little, I just figured it's big news, but it hasn't, you might have seen it already. AMD has open sourced their Radeon ray tracing analyzer, so that it is that was made for Windows and Linux. It's been officially open sourced. They announced that this Radeon ray tracing analyzer earlier this year was announced to assist with performance and bottlenecks. The company has not released the code publicly, like most previous applications and tools, but 1 week ago announced that it had been made public as part of its continued transparency with its coding. AMD explains that Radeon Ray Tracing Analyzer will allow users to monitor the performance of applications using ray tracing and locate possible issues that could arise during use. Along with the announcement of the RRA code becoming available to the public, AMD has also revealed the AMD Radeon data file, a library on GitHub under AMD RDF, which allows developers to open Radeon data files or RDFs. RDF is already in use, especially for users who have used the Radeon Ray Tracing Analyzer since its introduction. Again, AMD, more AMD. After open sourcing its Radeon ray tracing analyzer code, that was 4 days ago, AMD's GPU Open team has a new open source project announcement. It's Brotli G. Brotli G is a new open source GPU based implementation of Brotli for compression and decompression. Given that Brotli is widely used for web assets and other data compression purposes, AMD engineers have decided to work on Brotli G for speeding up that compression decompression on GPUs. Alright, now we get into the meat and potatoes. Software releases. Wayland on Wayland Protocols 1.30 introduces new protocol to allow screen tearing. In the early days of Wayland, one of the main philosophical driving points for this alternative to the Xorg server, Xorg, was the every frame is perfect and would forego screen tearing among other rendering impurities. Introduced now with Wayland Protocols 1.30, though, is a new staging protocol to allow screen tearing. Wayland Protocols 1.30 was released today, where the sole change is the new staging protocol to allow for optional tearing. The new tearing control protocol allows clients to let the compositors know that their surface contents can tear if necessary, showing a mix of old/new surface contents. Speaking of Wayland, KDE has added NVIDIA GPU power reporting, Plasma Wayland crash fixes. Has added power reporting and has fixed Plasma Wayland crash issues. KDE dev Nate Graham is out with his weekly development summary, highlighting all of the interesting KDE improvements over the past week. There continues to be fixes to the KDE Plasma Wayland session, NVIDIA power reporting support within the system monitor, and other highlights as outlined below. When KDE Discover is presenting error messages, it now presents a dialog window rather than tiny little overlays at the bottom of that auto disappear after a few seconds. KDE System Monitor can also now detect and monitor power usage with NVIDIA GPUs. Ocular scroll speed with the touchpad is now significantly faster. Amongst other lesser fixes. In terms of a more major fix, though, Plasma should no longer randomly crash when moving the cursor over a Plasma panel. This was an issue with previous versions, and was just reported recently, and they have been able to fix that. OpenVPL 2023.1 is released for Intel's open source video processing library. The Cloud Hypervisor 28 is released as the project's first LTS edition. Micron releases HSE 3.0 open source storage engine. VLC 3.0.18 is out. VLC has been out, VLC 3.0.18 is here more than 8 months after VLC 3.0.17 and introduces support for the RISC-V hardware architecture, DVB sub support inside MKV files, Y16 Chroma support, as well as major adaptive streaming update, notably for multiple timelines and WebVTT, web video text tracks format. For those who use VirtualBox, they have released 7.0.4, but is mainly just to address issues with to rebuild behavior kernel modules on system shutdown, and it also adds general improvements in startup scripts for both Linux and host guests. So it is a pretty minor point, just a minor point release. I guess the most important thing they did is they've updated it to fix the rebuild behavior of kernel modules on system shutdown and fixed progress indication during the automatic installation of Linux guest additions. Intel has released IWD 2.0, which is a modern wireless daemon for Wi-Fi devices. I personally use it. I've mentioned it before. I would recommend. Well, if you have Intel, I would recommend it. I'm not sure how it works on other platforms. It might not, considering Intel would probably only program for theirs, but WASMer 3.0 has been released. It is a web assembly runtime. It's a web assembly with a goal to run any code on any client. SDL 2.26 has been released, and SDL 3 development is now underway. SDL 2.26 features simulated VSync for SDL2 software renderer, new joystick hints. The HID API driver now supports Nintendo, Wii, and Sony PlayStation 3 controllers. X11 primary selection clipboard API support on Linux. A new hint on Linux around nose pointer warp emulation under Wayland. IME soft keyboard input on Android, and more. Downloads and more details on SDL can be found via their GitHub. Again, that'll be linked in the description. GIMP, that is GIMP 2, has released 2.99.14 because we will never get to 3.0, or at least that's how it feels. GIMP 2.99.14 is out this weekend as a latest development release on a way towards the elusive GIMP 3.0. GIMP 3.0, with switching from GTK to GTK3 toolkit and a plethora of other improvements, remain under development. GIMP 3 remains under heavy development as this leading open source free software alternative to Adobe Photoshop. With the new GIMP 2.19.14 development release, some of the latest advancements include improving the alignment tool so that it's easier to work and greatly simplified, new outline tools for the text tool, all transform tools are now activated automatically, fine-tuning GIMP's copy-paste handling, a new gray theme for GIMP, much faster XCF saving, vectors paths have now a proper structure within XCF file formats, improving file outputting to PDF, AVIF, Adobe PSD, JPEG XL, and other file format handling enhancements. As for when GIMP 3 will finally happen, the release announcement mentions with this release, we are really approaching GIMP 3 release, as can be seen from the roadmap of 3.0, where most items are nearly done or done. We are clearly reaching this part of development when we start targeting specific pain points, which means a lot. Now, I guess for the fun part, if you wish to call it that, the Linux market share report. ItsFoss collects data from around the web and releases it monthly. I don't generally use ItsFoss for a series of reasons, mostly because it is mostly just a tech blog rather than a news site, but I do know that he pulls it off of sites that I would personally trust. So, stat counter. Linux occupies about 2.6 of the market share compared to the 15.74 for Mac OS and 75.93 for Windows. Now, just to clarify, stat counter, I believe, actually reported Linux as occupying 2.3 0.3% of the market share in August when I did the last video. So we did make a gain of 0.3 points. It's 0.3 percentage points. W3 schools, as of October 2022, Linux has a grip on about 4% of the market share compared to 9.8% of macOS and 70.4% of Windows. Again, 4%, I believe that's also higher than it was. I'm not sure. Steam survey, in terms of desktop gaming, Linux has a market share of 1.28%. Ubuntu, Arch, and Manjaro are the top 3 gaming distributions, when compared to the 2.23 for macOS and 96.50 for Windows. No surprise there. Even though we do have Proton, it is still taking a while for that to maybe not for that to be introduced, just for more people to realize that they have the option. Statinsta, which was last updated on June 2022, so this might be out of date. The Linux desktop market share was 2.42% when compared to the 14.64 for macOS and 76.33 for Windows. If anyone's a little confused how all these are different, again, they're different sites, they have a different collection method, and they have different people visiting. It's all random. Then Stack Overflow survey, no surprise, Linux holds a majority for operating system, holds a majority as a number of coders. About 40% of coders use Linux-based operating system for personal use, and 39% use it for professional use. The reason I say majority, even though it is 40%, is to give room for macOS. Even though I don't think very many people program on it, I wouldn't be surprised if about 3 or 4% did. So I don't know. Maybe it's not as it's at least half and half with Windows. So that's all I really had. I guess. So it says discussion, and I'm not sure exactly. I guess if you want to talk about anything, I can give you more details. I didn't read the entire article, so obviously, I can obviously read more of the article. I can tell you more about it if you would like. We can do our own research. We can just stay on stream for a little bit. Wow, we've been going for a while now. Okay. But is there anything you were interested in, you as the audience? Huh? No, not an hour. Half an hour. Well, I guess seeing nothing, what the hell? 2 for those. I guess I don't really see anything, but Tails OS, just a quick recap on what that is. So I know I explained it's an anonymity software, and I might actually do a review of this at some point later. I don't know, I might even do it later today, depending on whether anything else happens with this. I might just air it, and I might just cut the stream, and then open up another stream and just review it, and just do a review of Tails. But as there's nobody's really going on about anything, I guess I'll just go in quickly about what Tails is for anybody that might be curious about how exactly it works. So Tails OS is meant to be booted on a USB stick. It is very, very, very small. It can be installed to a hard drive. But it is very small. And it is one of them, and it is highly anonymous. It is so. It uses Tor browser, its main browser. Now, if anybody's unfamiliar with what exactly Tor is, that would be a separate video entirely. I could do a whole thing on the history of Tor, and like the Tor, and where the concept and everything. That would probably be a very interesting video. But, this just in. I'm not reading. I'm not reading that, Scott. You're funny though. Nice try. Where was I? I completely lost my train of thought. Oh, so Tor browser. So it uses Tor as its main browser. Now, Tor, if anybody's unfamiliar with it, is a privacy. Well, it's extreme privacy. So it's most commonly associated with the dark web, which makes sense. It is the dark web. The Tor network is the dark web. I would like to say there's a difference between the deep web and the dark web. The deep web is simply like stuff you can't see on the top level. It's like stuff that's blocked by a sign-in screen. Technically, the deep web. Dark web is like, what you think of like a hitman site or something. All of it. They're all scams. Don't go in there expecting to buy something. They're all scams. Anyway, they basically that's what Tor is used for. But if you know anything about the dark web, it has to be anonymous. So even if you use the Tor browser for clear web searching, it is entirely Onion browser. Yeah, the Tor browser. Tor is Onion. The Tor network is what Onion's like. Yeah, perhaps. Well, no, like you can use the Tor browser is. You can use it to browse a clear web, and it's very very anonymous. But the Onion browser is the same thing, isn't it? The Tor browser is what's officially released by Tor, by the Tor project. 1 second, let me just do it. The Onion browser. Oh Jesus, I just can't get a break. Okay, the Onion. What the hell? Cancel. What are you doing? There. Browser. Onion browser, super fast, popular sites. Isn't this just the Tor software? The Tor browser? Onion. No, it's two different things. I mean, it does. It has the same purpose, but the nickname for Tor is the Onion browser. The Tor project. Yeah, the Tor project develops the Tor browser. 1 second, let me show you their start page. Yeah, I'm looking at the start page too. I guess you're just calling it a different name. But yeah, Onion is all very, very, yeah. Onion is what they do. I mean, all of their sites have a .onion extension. Yeah, I can actually hop on the dark web at some point if you want me to. I go on there occasionally just to laugh at all the conspiracy theorists. Nice Shrek reference. Wait, is that a Shrek reference? I hope that's a... I hope that's nothing earlier and I'm not, like, making myself seem really young, but I'm pretty sure there's a Shrek reference. Ogres are like onions, they have layers. No? No? No. I know you're talking about Tor. But, like, the onions thing, the layers, don't worry about it. Okay, so basically that's just to give you an idea. I mean, even the most basic web browser, granted the web browsers are some of the most vulnerable places on your Tor's like an onion, has layers, yeah. Wait, is that on their web page? 1 second. I mean, I understand you're just saying it. That would be the missed opportunity. Okay, what was I gonna say? So, even on the browser level, where, we all know browsers are one of the most vulnerable places on your computer. It is there. It is there supporting you. It is there trying to keep yourself as anonymous as possible. Let me pull up the Tails OS website real quick. I believe they have an about site. 1 second. Tails OS. It is very much, I mean, it uses even the same color scheme as Tor. I mean, I kid you not, look. Don't do that. Alright. Yeah, so it has the same thing as Tor does. It's the same color scheme, same everything. And they're all non-profit. This, for example, is Linux. It's based off of Debian, for those who don't know. It is digital security. It is a security. I can't finish that. Security. It's all free software. Everything on it is free software. It is based on Debian GNU /Linux. It is all free software. You could put non-free software on it, I believe, but you have to download it. So you can't just install it through the repos. I believe Tails OS is considered to be a good operating system by GNU. I don't know. But GNU is also so specific with how they categorize things. It's really hard to just read the question without using their logo. How can I use the torque? With layers, yeah. They do recognize they have layers. Alright, anyway, yeah, you know what? I'll just download it now. Install Tails terminal. Download only. Alright. Oh, and Charles. Oh, wait, what are you doing? I read the question about the logo. Yeah, I saw it. Alright. So we don't keep infringing on the news stream, I'm gonna cut it off now. But I will be back on in a couple minutes. I'll just change the name. So just in about a minute or so, I'm just gonna change the name. So just give me a second, and I'll be back. I'll guess give me a couple minutes. I'll be back. I'm gonna take the time to grab a drink. I'll be right back up. But then it also gives it time to shut itself off, so I can officially have a recording of just the newscast. and then go from there. Is that okay with everybody? Well, I guess the one person. I'm gonna take that as a yes, I guess. I just can't. I just don't want to. You understand? I don't want to keep it on for too long. Especially with. Yep. Okay. I got a thumbs up. All right. Cool. I don't need to keep explaining. I like that. All right. That's gonna be the stream then. So thank you for joining me on the Linux Newscast. This Linux Newscast. I'm gonna go get a drink, and I'm gonna go start live streaming again. But it'll just be this one thing. But you know what? I had a good time. I hope you enjoyed the news. I hope it gave you something to. It gave you a framework for what's happening in the Linux community, how things are progressing. And I hope it maybe taught you something along the way. It might not have. I don't know. So, that in mind, I'm just going to end the stream. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. I appreciate it. And have a great day. And for the love of God, please have a very safe Thanksgiving. We don't want anyone getting hurt. The Linux community is already small enough. Thank you, and have a great night. Thank you for joining. Have a great night, and drive safely. Enjoy family, and travel easy.